Hello and welcome, and thank you for being part of WorkSafe's webinar today. Why WorkSafe exists, Darren's story. My name is Cameron Ling and I'll be your host this morning. Our special guest is a remarkable, motivated man. By way of some backstory to introduce our guest, in 2016, a truck crash on the job nearly ended Darren Smith's life. He survived, but a below-knee amputation forced him, a successful self-employed plumber, to find new ways of living and working. As many people would, faced with this sort of trauma and the subsequent challenges, Darren experienced psychological struggles as he suddenly went from being the face of the business to being away from work for 4 months, questioning whether he really wanted to return at all. We will soon hear from him as he shares his inspirational story and how he successfully transitioned to a new way of living, working, contributing, and probably most importantly, a new sense of self. He is a 2022 WorkSafe Health and Safety Ambassador and was a finalist in the 2021 WorkSafe Awards Worker Return to Work Achievement Award. Here is Darren's video from the awards presentation night.
My name is Darren Smith. I own a plumbing business. I've been a plumber for 35 years and I live in Warrnambool. Prior to the injury, we had 18 staff. I was involved in performing plumbing tasks, driving excavators, trucks, etc. October 5th, 2016, I was involved in a motor vehicle accident. I was driving my work truck and collided with a milk tanker and was entrapped in the vehicle for about an hour and a half or so. Then was flown to the Alfred in Melbourne. Part of the process was the amputation of the leg. So I was amputated above the knee on the right leg, and some other injuries, obviously punctured lungs and some extraction injuries and that type of thing. Post-accident, there's an enormous amount of stress on the staff, so it required them to step up and to adapt to continue on with the business, but also with my family, the shock for them, and then the fear, I suppose, of how we would adapt and what the future looked like. So the strength to get through this came from a number of sources. Obviously my family, a daughter who was just completing year 12, a relatively young person, and I didn't want to reduce my capacity to live a normal life. It was very important to get back to work as soon as reasonably practicable for a personal goal sense, and also it takes a lot of pressure off people to know that you're regaining your independence, your health's improving, and you're able to move on to the next phase of your life. Returning to work, I had to readapt my role within the business. My new responsibilities include supervision of staff, management of staff, job planning and tendering. To do that, I've returned to study. So a diploma of business at Swinburne. I've done a diploma of leadership and management, and I've just about completed a diploma of workplace health and safety at Swinburne as well. I also teach at a TAFE college here in Warrnambool.
I just think from what he's overcome, the attitude that he's taken to overcome it, he's never ever wanted people to feel sorry for him. It was all about bettering himself, educating people, and getting the message out there about safety.
The support along the way from all persons has been amazing. From my wife and daughter, and then obviously all the staff as well. So it's been an amazing group effort from everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Darren Smith. Thank you, Darren, for joining us today.
Thank you, Cameron. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you with us. Now, today's session is going to run for about 45 minutes. There will be an opportunity for some questions at the end, which is really important. You'll see on the right-hand side of your screen, the chat box. That's how you can enter those questions in. And please feel free to start entering those questions anytime you like. If you've got a question ready to go, put it in there, hit enter after you've written it in there, and then I'll have it ready to go to ask on your behalf. I would like to make a small note on this one. Some of our content today may include material of a sensitive nature that may be triggers for some of you. If that happens, please feel free to take a break. All right, let's get straight into our guest, as I mentioned, Darren Smith is here. Darren, it's great to meet you online.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you joining us today to share your inspirational return to work and return to life story. We saw it a little bit in the video there, but could I ask you to start by telling us a little bit about your life before the accident?
Before the accident, Warrnambool boy, born and bred in Warrnambool. Started an apprenticeship as an apprentice plumber as a 16-year-old, very young and naive, but I really enjoyed that and enjoy the plumbing tasks and role, and travelled a little bit when I completed our apprenticeship, but it came back to Waterville to settle with my wife Kerry, and then worked as a subcontractor for a number of years, and then about 27 I started my own plumbing business. Employed the first apprentice. I then progressively grew the business and developed it from a home maintenance and emergency style business to eventually branching out into some commercial work and growing the business to the point where it was 16 to 18 staff at the time of the accident. Out of work, did different activities. It was relatively, did a lot of cycling during my 30s. Found that to be a great exercise, but also time consuming. So into my 40s, probably let myself go a little bit in terms of working too hard and losing the balance. And so prior to the accident, I'd done Kokoda as a sort of a chance to reset and do different things. So I was in that headspace all that time, at space of my life where I was looking to grow and develop and try and rebalance life a little bit. So yeah, so been married for 29 years this year, 24-year-old daughter. So yeah, quite a good sort of happy life. Yep.
A very full life. Darren, if you don't mind, we saw some pictures of that in that video from the awards presentation night, but can you tell us what happened on the 5th of October 2016 that changed all of that?
Yes, I was, so afternoon, I was visited a building site where the boys were working, called in and said, oh, is there anything I can do? You know, it's 3 o'clock, at 2:30 or so. I said, the last couple of jobs for the day. And they said, oh, there's a truckload of dirt over there. Can you get rid of that? And run out to the quarry and bring some rock back ready for tomorrow morning. Yep, that's fine. Every opportunity to jump in the truck and go for a drive, and wasn't in a rush, wasn't in a hurry, wasn't just in a good space, and heading out towards the quarry. And then, as you can see, the milk tanker pulled out onto the road, and I struck the milk tanker, causing that entrapment, that accident at the scene. Fairly complex sort of accident scene in terms of the two vehicles intermeshed with each other, and obviously a human being stuck in there. So very fortunate. We have incredible first responders, SES, CFA, local ambulance. Obviously, we've got a HEMS helicopter here in Waterville. So all of those, police, obviously, all those emergency services swung into action. And they were able to, and with the assistance of some local tradesperson and also the city council workers who were working nearby, they were able to remove the vehicles and release me as part of that. So, but unfortunately, as part of that process, in the recovery to save my life, was the removal of the leg above the knee. So I woke up on the Friday morning, which was 2 days later. The leg had been removed, which in hindsight and it was the best thing to do and was what had to happen to save my life.
You mentioned that moment there. You woke up in Melbourne's Alfred Hospital, and it dawned on you that you had lost a leg due to this accident and that perhaps life would never be the same again. What were your initial thoughts at that time?
That I was alive. That was probably the overwhelming sense of relief. I think being part, I was conscious for 40 minutes or so during that phase of recovery or removal, and there was times that I didn't think that I was coming out. So when I did wake up, that was my immediate sense of relief and gratitude, and then I think. For myself as a problem solver, I thought, well, we'll get to that. We'll solve that problem. We'll deal with that down the track. I'm not knowing what that involved, but I think just the overwhelming sense of gratitude. That was probably our first response. Yeah.
You mentioned you had a business, 18 staff. It was going really well. fit and healthy guy, obviously a really loving family and a busy life. This has happened, this accident that you're talking about. And after your initial stay in hospital, you were sent to the Epworth's Amputee Rehabilitation Centre for 8 weeks. How did you approach your rehabilitation? What was your focus?
Well, fortunately, my business is being run back here by staff, and my wife was heavily involved in that. I was very grateful for that, and so that enabled me to just concentrate on the recovery process, to focus on putting some steps in place, setting small, simple goals initially. The left leg was broken in 3 places, so I was unable to put a load through that initially, which was probably in hindsight a good thing, even though I was frustrated at the time. It enabled the body to recover and then to strengthen my body, and to get the head around the whole amputee concept and process. But then also to work with the health professionals at the Epworth, the physiotherapists, the exercise physiologists, and all the other staff there in resetting and creating some reasonable and achievable goals. Yep.
Trauma like yours that you're referring to here can have a huge ripple effect beyond the individual, but also their families, friends, workmates, and communities. How did this manifest with you?
Well, for my wife and family, the daughters and parents, was for every parent to receive that phone call that your child's been involved in an accident. My parents in their early 70s at that stage, was very traumatic for them, and I think part of the issue at the time was the unknown. All they knew that Darren was in the hospital. He was on his way to Melbourne in the helicopter. No other real details. So there was that period of uncertainty. For my wife, for the police officers to work into her workplace and to say that your husband's been in a serious accident and you'll need to get to Melbourne ASAP. That was, I couldn't possibly imagine what she went through for that. And then also for my daughter, she was in nursing at boarding school in Melbourne, so there was that period of uncertainty. For our staff, for the employer to be not there, and then there's also that period of uncertainty in terms of death, or will he recover, or how that all manifests. So it's quite I wasn't obviously aware of all that, and I think coming back, when I did come back to Warrnambool and reconnected with people, I became aware of the huge flow-on effect and ripple effect that had on people. So, yep.
And for you, Darren, your mental health is so very, very important at a crisis point like this, I would have thought. How did psychological counselling support you at this time?
So one of the services that were offered at the Epworth in Hawthorn was the offer of a psychologist. Along with all the other health professionals that were available and assisted in that rehabilitation process, I could either participate in that or choose not to. I chose to, and I think for me it was a chance to debrief, a chance to capture what had happened in the lead up to the accident and the accident itself. Discuss that post-traumatic stress sort of issues that could arise, but also then that reconnection back into the community. What does the future look like? For us, for myself and my family, we had no interaction with amputees in the past. No sort of it wasn't part of we weren't exposed, or we weren't aware of that, how that would work and what involved all that. So this was a whole new language for us, a whole new things to learn and understand. Prosthetic limbs, all of the process and re-engaging the hips and the glutes and walking correctly, proper gait, proper posture, etc. And then all the possible flow-on effects in terms of the increased load on the left leg, increased load on the rest of the body. So it was a whole different language. And the psychologist was a great chance to sort of share and deload a lot of that fear and anxiety from all of that.
You had to go through all of those physical things you're talking about, and then the psychological part. After you get home to Warrnambool, I'm keen to hear about that. You decided you would go back to work, but had to dramatically change the way you did it. How were you feeling at this point?
Anxious, not keen, to be honest. My management style, rightly or wrongly, was very involved in the business, very involved in what was happening within the business, and so I came back to a business where I was not digging every hole and managing every job, micromanaging. So I had to change my management style, but also trust people, trust staff, allow them to do their job, and then try and find where I fitted in that whole process. Was I just be a manager, just be a tenderer, just be a business owner, and just let people do their job. So there's a period of transition there, probably at least 12 months or so of re-establishing and finding what my role in the business was. So.
Well, you mentioned that functionally you weren't able to do the same things at work that you'd done previously.
Yep.
How did you approach this? And I suppose I'm keen to hear, what were the results from this change in approach?
Well, I once again talking with our field officer, my WorkSafe case manager, with CGU at the time, was discussions about retraining. So identify the skill set that I already had, a skill set as a things that I've been doing within the business from a accounting perspective, from a managing staff, quoting, tendering, and trying to capture that within qualifications and some training, and to improve that process. So the first course that I did was the Cert 4 training and assessment. That then enabled me to do some teaching. The other courses that I chose then to do was at Swinburne was the Diploma of Business, Diploma of Leadership and Management, and that hopefully has enlightened me and improved my management skills, but also dealing with people and recognising allowing people to do their job without and being confident in them. Diploma of occupational health and safety, which has obviously taught me a lot about the Occupational Health and Safety Act, obligations and requirements, but also enables me to be a better teacher in that sense. Going back to university as a 50-year-old has been a challenge, but I've actually found it, because I have some life experience, brings some context to the courses, and hopefully I've come back as a better manager of the business.
Well, and you've touched a little bit about what it meant to you returning to work. What about what it meant to your family, the staff, and the community around you?
Oh, very much so. I think there's an anxiety for everybody around us how that looks and what that looks like. But to see me back in the workplace, fulfilling a role, being able to participate back in the workplace at a full-time capacity, and obviously I feel happy within myself, and that reflects around me. So I think I know for my parents, it's a relief to them that I'm back at work, that I'm working full-time, that I've adapted. I know my wife, she's very proud of what we've achieved together. So yeah, I think it's a much more, everybody's much more at ease, and seeing me with my adapted roles.
One of the early things that you did that I admire so much was to investigate other ways to contribute professionally, using your own story to help others, like you're doing here today. Tell us about your work as a sessional teacher at TAFE.
Yeah. So luckily I've had a long-term connection with the local Southwest TAFE. I've employed a lot of apprentices over the years, over 30 apprentices. So I was very familiar with the staff what they deliver down there. And we've had it. We're very lucky in Warrnambool to have such a magnificent facility here and a very hands-on teaching staff and admin group. So I had a discussion with one of the managers, Chris Lawler, about if there's a role that I could fulfil there. Once again, not being sure how I would have read that back into plumbing. It was almost like a stopgap at one stage there. Like if this doesn't work, then I've got something to back up. But I've been able to manage to do both at the same time. So I teach generally on average 2 to 3 days a week. I teach a lot of the OH&S courses, the civil construction courses, traffic management, construction induction, which is targeted to young workers, to new people to the industry. So I'm able to deliver some occupational health and safety context to those courses, and then if I'm not getting their attention, I'll just pull out a couple of videos or photos, and that certainly sharpens them up very quickly. So it's good, and I'm enjoying that. And it's a new group of people every day, every class. So it's a really good, I'm feeling quite engaged in that process and enjoying that teaching. Yep.
That's fantastic, and no doubt a big focus on workplace health and safety right throughout those messages.
Yes. Yes.
You've retrained in other ways as well. Can you tell us about those?
In terms of, just been in the business. Exercise-wise, I do a lot of swimming. So a lot of swimming, and we've done a few, did the Pier to Pub 5K swim a couple of years ago, pre-COVID. That was very enjoyable. So it was all part of that goal-setting process of what can I do and what sport do I feel comfortable in. So exercise-wise, not quite as much swimming at the moment, but more gym exercises. But yeah, so that's something I enjoy. Yep.
Also, I think you mentioned before, you might have touched on it briefly, a diploma of business, diploma
Yes.
of leadership, like
Yes.
a number of ways to improve your learnings.
Yes. And the Swinburne process, I've enjoyed that. Initially, pre-COVID was face-to-face and then workshop-style training, but now it's gone online. But those diploma courses through Swinburne have been great to just provide context and modern work practices. And usually most of the groups I'm with is quite a diverse range of people from other industries and other trades. So we're able to compare different stories and different ways of industry compliance, etc. So, yeah, so I've really enjoyed that. I was coming back to study later in life. Yeah.
And personally, what does your life look like now? What are you planning for your future?
I've got a fairly consistent sort of process in place. I made one of the things I did. I made a promise to myself after the accident that I would try and have a balanced life, whatever that looks like. So for me, that's exercise on a daily basis, walk the dog once a day, try to control, my alcohol and all that sort of thing. So I have a much more balanced approach. Walk out the office here every afternoon at 5:45. I'm done for the day, and you leave that behind. So it's a much more balanced approach. I think going forward, I'm only 52, so I'm happy to continue working as long as possible, but also then to explore some travel. And much to my wife's chagrin, I'd really love to do Kokoda again. I loved Kokoda. I think from a mental perspective and a physical challenge, it would be very challenging, but I think I'm up for the challenge. Yeah, that's one of my aspirational goals, at least, anyway. So.
Oh, fantastic. What a challenge it would be, but something tells me you'll be up for that challenge, Darren. Fantastic. Every return to work story is different. So it's hard to be specific with this, but what would you say, Darren, to employers who have a worker returning?
Well, it's interesting. I've got one worker off at the moment who's just had a knee operation from a football-related injury. So I've texted him a couple of times just to touch base and ask him how his operation went, how he's recovering. We're not expecting to see him back for a couple of weeks at least. So just that initial contact, that to and fro, making sure that he's not forgotten. He's certainly not forgotten in our workplace, but so that initial engagement. I think if it's a long-term injury, you're looking for examine what a role is, so whether it be an altered role, light duties, administrative role, retraining if there's retraining available or suitable. So that initial engagement, and then those conversations about we might not be able to do what you did before, but what can we use going forward? Using this skill set. Like I said, for 35 years, I was a hands-on tradesman, and able to transition that into an administrative role, supervisory role, and even though, as much as I'd love to jump in the trenches and use the shovel, I'm probably, they're happy to let the younger blokes have a crack at that now. So, but yeah, certainly that re-engagement, that conversations, retraining. As we know in the world we live in at the moment, skilled staff are very hard to find, and we just need to engage them as much as possible, keep them within the business. But from a mental perspective, if you're having contact with your employer, you felt like you're being sought after or thought about, then you're certainly very keen to get back to work as soon as possible. So.
Well, thank you, Darren, for sharing all of your very personal and very honest responses to what I imagine must be hard at times to relive what you went through, but we really appreciate the key messages coming out of that. I'd love to get to some questions because we have a number of questions coming through from everyone who's tuning in today. So I will jump to those as quick as I can. A lot of people just wanting a little clarification, Darren, if you don't mind, around the accident that occurred.
Yep.
Was the root cause of the accident due to any unsafe practice that could have been prevented?
We have examined that from all perspectives in terms of the police examined the accident and WorkSafe obviously being me at work at that time. No charges were laid, no prosecutions. In terms of the vehicle that I struck, that driver was visiting that site for the very, very first time. And when, people have driven trucks in the past, once you're committed to taking off, it's very difficult to stop and also then to put the thing in reverse. So no, that was examined and all clear. And even from myself, from that mental perspective, we hold no blame or malice or fault in the terms of anyone. So we're very at ease, not at ease. We're very we feel comfortable that it's an accident in almost as purest sense. So that's yes.
Great. Again, a number of people wanting an answer to this question. Have you faced any issues around disability, e.g. discrimination or ignorance? If so, were you prepared to deal with it, both practically speaking and mentally?
No direct discrimination. As I said, the TAFE College themselves have been very accommodating and never been raised as an issue in any terms with them and any other employers. I've no issues in terms of contracts, works that I supervise. I enter building sites. Everybody's well aware of my status, so there's been no issues in that terms. I think encountering an amputee for the first time can create a lot of questions, and certainly a curiosity factor, and even from all the way through from young children. I mean, I was yesterday walking around Waterville with shorts on. I'm not sure why in this weather, but had shorts on. So visiting supermarkets, visiting shops, jumping in and out of vehicles. You can certainly see people are curious and have a look. Where appropriate, I'll address that in terms of explaining to young children or people that I was involved in a vehicle accident, explain the mechanisms of the leg, how it works, and that usually it's a great icebreaker, conversation starter, and people generally appreciate that you've shared how it occurred and how it all works and the mechanics of the whole process. So I found that to be that can be confronting, certainly. And if you're not comfortable with that, you can. I've embraced it, I suppose, and quite open about that. So
that's great to hear, Darren, because I know, and not to make it about me, but personally, my dad, who lost his hand, as I mentioned a bit earlier, in a workplace accident when he was 19, would be asked about it, or as you said, children would be inquisitive, and he wouldn't want to talk about it. There was no comfort to do that, and still to this day, really tries to steer away from any conversations like that. So
it was interesting. I was standing in the streets of Port Fairy 12 months after the accident. This lady came up to me, and I had shorts on, and she started asking about their leg and discussing it. And she explained that her son-in-law had a workplace accident, and he was an amputee, and he wore pants at all times, and would discuss it, and wasn't, and even to the point where he restricted his social circles because he was felt uncomfortable and dealing with that. So everybody deals with these things. There's no right or wrong to this, but I feel, and this is hence the reason I'm here today. I think it's important that we discuss workplace incidents, workplace accidents, but also how we can then recover and then adapt and find a way through to continue a healthy and fulfilled life.
Absolutely, well said. Next one here, just from a few people, is around your apprentices that you mentioned that you do employ. You've got a number of young apprentices, I believe. What sort of workplace health and safety messages do you use in your own business with them?
Well, it's one of the questions I ask in the OH&S classes that I take, and also to my apprentices is who's the most important person in your life? And it's a confronting question sometimes, and ultimately it's ourselves, it's you. So I encourage young people to stop, ask questions, don't do something if they're not comfortable with it, put practices in place. We're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. We do the best we can, but it's certainly it's something that's discussed and raised on a regular basis within our workplaces, the safe work practices and getting home for dinner. That's the number one priority.
Another question here from a few people. Do you have any advice for people struggling to get back to work after a bad accident?
I think develop some small goals, some initial goals, simple goals. Whether it be become independent, discuss with an employer if the employer's not responsive. Talk to your case manager. Look at what skill set you already have, and then try and capture that, whether it's in a training program or a qualification. But know that the people you work with care for you. Hopefully, they care for you. They want to be back, even if it's in a simple role or a different role. It's great to have people back in your workplace that have been through an incident. So reach across, ask the questions, be proactive. Quite often, as with most things in life, people don't come looking for you. You've actually got to be up, look out for yourself, and then be proactive in your care.
Great, thank you for that. Another one around your recovery and journey back to work. You returned to work very early in your recovery. What did those initial discussions look like with your treaters?
Well, in hindsight, because I was the business owner and manager and I would have rather not come back to work so quickly, but financially from the sense of making sure the business was still there when I got back, but also relieving the pressure from the people around me so that they could continue take the pressure off them. I think, ideally I wouldn't have come back to work so quickly, but the conversation with the Epworth was, find a role, find a simple tasks, stay within your lane, and do that, and then progressively increase your load. I didn't get I got my license back relatively quickly, but I didn't actually drive for nearly 10 months after the accident. I never felt comfortable driving. I never felt the need. I caught taxis, got rides with people. So even that was just a progressive step back into that driving process. So not all at once, just a slow progression.
Just a couple of people asking this one. How important is it for you to be able to tell your story in forums like this?
Yes, it's important I'm comfortable in telling the story in the fact that I've obviously lived it, but also I've examined it from all directions and they're comfortable. Hopefully that it makes people have these conversations, but also can see that even with an amputee or even with a long-term injury or something that a major injury that's occurred, you can still re-enter the workforce or go back to your role within your workplace. So I'm not comfortable listening to the sound of my own voice, to be honest with you. I'm not comfortable seeing myself on video, but I think it's I've been dealt this hand, and I think the amount of assistance that I've received from all parties, I feel some sort of mutual obligation, I suppose, to talk and to share my experience, and hopefully that helps other people. That's my main motivation.
Well, it is very much appreciated that you do speak out. Don't worry, it never changes. I'm sick of the sound of my own voice and how I look on camera, but your message is so important, Darren, so we really appreciate you sharing it. One last question here. Would you encourage injured workers take advantage of return to work schemes? Are you still having any insured treatment?
Oh yeah, yes. I've just had a conversation with my insurer this morning, actually. So I have a prosthesis company, Promotions Prosthesis, who will be treating me hopefully for the rest of my long life. I tend to wear through prosthesis relatively quickly, as you'd imagine. So that's an ever-growing, evolving field. But also, as my body changes, the prosthesis needs to be refitted and recast, etc. So there's an ongoing commitment there from my insurer to provide that, but also then from my prosthesis company to provide that ongoing care and enabling mobility for me. Life with the prosthesis is much better than life in a wheelchair and life on crutches. So as I said, my commitment is to keep fit, use the gym, maintain my health, but then the other commitment is from my WorkSafe insurer to provide the tools required to enable me to re-engage with the workforce and to do my job. So for me, it's a mutual obligation conversation.
The prosthesis company might have its work cut out when you tackle Kokoda, Darren. It'd be a good challenge for both of you.
Yes.
I did say that was the last one, but I do want to just ask one more. A number of people are sending through. Thank you, Darren, for sharing. There's a lot of appreciation for you sharing your story on here.
Thank you.
But the last one I will ask: do other injured workers ever reach out to you to talk to you about it?
Yes, they do. Yes, I've just sent a text message this morning to another young lady who's an amputee, and she's having some discussions about her leg and her her mobility. So we're sharing a couple of war stories together and providing as much advice as I feel comfortable giving. Yes, there is a couple of people in the area that have had similar incidents and injuries. The only advice that I can give is from my experience. I'm not a health professional. I'm not a psychologist. So I try not to overreach or to overextend. But certainly as a peer or someone who's had that lived experience, I try to share as much, and even just to listen and to provide a support where possible. Yeah, so I'm very open for that, but I also understand my limitations and my parameters as well. So.
No, well, thank you again so much for sharing today. We do appreciate it very much. It's a great story to listen to, the way that you've overcome that, and I know again with the number of people who are sending through that it's having an impact on a lot of people. Positive discussion, Darren. Great you are moving ahead and not looking the past. Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Darren. This was amazing and inspiring to hear your story. Just a few of the comments that are coming through. So we do very much appreciate your time today, Darren.
Thank you. Thank you, Cameron. Thank you, WorkSafe, for the opportunity. Thank you for everybody listening, watching.
I agree with Darren there. Thank you to everyone who is watching. We hope that you have found this informative, this session with Darren. If you do want a copy of this webinar, it's going to be available via WorkSafe's website in around about a month or so's time. So you can jump on there in case you want to listen back to anything that Darren has spoken about today. We will make a note shortly on the screen, a list of all the contacts that we have talked about today and that you might find helpful if you're an employer or an employee facing return to work. If you have any requests for further information, we recommend you to please get in touch with WorkSafe. And remember, if there's something you want to discuss urgently when you're at work, please contact the WorkSafe advisory line, and the emergency line is open 24/7. So please utilize it. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us today. All the best. Enjoy the rest of your day.